before New York became a vertical city of glass and steel, before it learned to glow at night like a man-made constellation. It was a place shaped by water, wind, and wary ambition. This earlier New York, half forgotten, layered beneath asphalt and memory, was born at the edge of an estuary where the Hudson River widened and breathed into the Atlantic. The land was uneven, marshy in places, forested in others, alive with the movement of tides and seasons. Long before avenues imposed order, the ground itself dictated life. The Lenape people knew this landscape intimately. To them, Mannahatta was an island of hills, streams, and rich soil, sustained by fishing, hunting, and trade routes that followed the natural curves of water. Their paths would one day become streets, their clearings, future neighborhoods. When Dutch settlers arrived in the early 17th century, they did not so much discover New York as insert themselves into an existing world. The Dutch West India Company saw opportunity where the Lenape saw balance. Commerce, not permanence, guided the first European footsteps. New Amsterdam began as a trading outpost, a rough frontier town pressed between wilderness and sea. Wooden houses clustered near the southern tip of Manhattan, their gabled roofs leaning into the wind. Dirt roads turned to mud in rain and dust in summer. The air carried the smells of salt water, animal hides, wood smoke, and human labor. Ships arrived heavy with goods and expectation, departing lighter but never empty. Furs, timber, and later, enslaved human beings passed through the harbor, tying the settlement to a growing global economy. Life was uncertain and precarious. Disease traveled easily across oceans, and fire threatened everything built of wood. Yet ambition thrived. The Dutch were traders by instinct, and New Amsterdam became a place where languages mixed freely: Dutch, English, French, African tongues, and indigenous speech all overlapping in the narrow streets. This diversity, born of commerce rather than idealism, would become one of New York's most enduring traits. In 1664, power shifted without a battle. English warships entered the harbor, and New Amsterdam became New York, named for the Duke of York. Flags changed, but daily life continued with little interruption. Merchants adapted quickly. The English expanded trade networks, strengthened ties to other colonies, and imposed new laws. Yet beneath official rule, the city remained a hybrid, shaped as much by habit and geography as by decree. As the 18th century unfolded, New York grew steadily but unevenly. It was still small by European standards, yet vital in its position. The harbor remained its heart, and ships dictated its rhythm. Dawn broke to the sound of rigging and shouted orders. Dusk settled with tavern laughter and the creak of docked vessels. The city stretched northward slowly, fields and farms marking the boundary between settlement and wilderness. Politics, too, began to press in. New York was a colony governed from afar, its wealth flowing outward while control flowed inward. Tensions simmered between merchants and governors, between those who benefited from imperial rule and those who resented its constraints. Newspapers and pamphlets circulated ideas that questioned authority, planting seeds of dissent alongside ledgers and cargo manifests. By the mid-18th century, New York stood at a threshold. It was no longer a frontier outpost, but not yet a metropolis. Its identity was fluid, shaped by trade, migration, and quiet resistance. Beneath its streets lay layers of memory: Lenape paths, Dutch foundations, English laws, all waiting to be built upon. The city's first light had appeared, fragile but persistent, promising a future neither its founders nor its rulers could fully imagine. Daily life in colonial New York was defined by contrast. Wealth and poverty existed side by side, separated by little more than a doorway or a street. Merchants lived in solid homes near the harbor, their fortunes rising and falling with the tides. Laborers crowded into smaller dwellings, their days governed by physical endurance and uncertain wages. Enslaved Africans, who made up a significant portion of the population, carried the city on their backs while being denied its promise. Markets were the city's social core. Here, farmers from the surrounding countryside sold produce beside fishermen and craftsmen. News traveled quickly in these spaces, of wars overseas, of shifting prices, of rumors that unsettled authority. Taverns played a similar role. They were places of rest, but also of debate, where sailors, artisans, and intellectuals crossed paths. Ideas flowed as freely as ale, and not all of them were welcome to those in power. Religion shaped the moral landscape, but it did not dominate it entirely. Churches rose along with commerce, representing a variety of denominations. Tolerance, born partly of necessity, allowed different faiths to coexist. Yet beneath this surface harmony lay divisions of class and race that hardened with time. Laws reinforced hierarchy, regulating who could vote, own property, or testify in court. Power in New York was visible and enforced. British soldiers patrolled streets during times of unrest, their presence a reminder of imperial reach. Taxes and trade regulations tightened, designed to benefit the crown rather than the colony. Merchants chafed under restrictions. Laborers bore the weight of rising prices. The distance between ruler and ruled, already vast across the Atlantic, felt even greater in daily life. Conflict did not always announce itself with violence. It simmered in courtrooms, in print, in whispered conversations. Yet when it erupted, it did so with intensity. The city experienced riots sparked by economic hardship, political resentment, and racial tension. One of the most devastating was the fire of 1776, which tore through New York during the American Revolutionary War, destroying large portions of the city and leaving thousands homeless. The revolution transformed New York more than any single event before it. Occupied by British forces for much of the war, the city became a center of military strategy and suffering. Loyalists fled, patriots endured imprisonment, and civilians navigated survival amid scarcity and fear. Streets once filled with commerce now echoed with marching boots and cannon fire. The harbor, once a gateway of opportunity, became a point of control and confinement. Yet even in occupation, New York changed. The war accelerated the collapse of old hierarchies and exposed the fragility of imperial power. When the British finally evacuated in 1783, the city emerged altered, physically damaged, economically shaken, but ideologically transformed. Independence brought uncertainty, but also possibility. New York was no longer a colonial prize, it was an American city. In the years that followed, migration surged. Former soldiers, merchants, and immigrants arrived seeking opportunity. Streets were rebuilt, commerce revived, and institutions reshaped to fit a new national identity. The city learned resilience through hardship, a lesson that would repeat across centuries. The true rebirth of New York came not in a single moment, but through accumulation of people, ambition, and memory. By the early 19th century, the city stood at the forefront of a young nation's imagination. Its harbor, expanded and deepened, welcomed ships from every corner of the world. Trade flourished, and with it came wealth, inequality, and relentless growth. The grid plan of 1811 imposed order where nature once ruled. Hills were leveled, streams buried, and streets extended northward with mathematical certainty. This was an act of confidence and erasure, signaling a belief that the future could be engineered. New York expanded rapidly, absorbing surrounding villages and transforming farmland into neighborhoods. The city's physical form began to mirror its ambition. Immigration reshaped its soul. Irish, German, and later Eastern European newcomers arrived in waves, bringing labor, culture, and resilience. Tenements rose quickly, often dangerously so, housing thousands in cramped conditions. The city's wealth grew alongside its suffering. Factories, docks, and railroads demanded constant labor, and New York answered with human endurance. Yet this era also produced reform. Journalists exposed injustice, activists demanded change. Public parks, schools, and infrastructure projects emerged from the recognition that unchecked growth carried consequences. Central Park, carved from the city's heart, offered a vision of balance, a reminder of the island's original landscape, reimagined for a modern age. The legacy of lost New York lies in what was built over and what endured beneath. Layers of history remain embedded in street names, foundations, and cultural habits. The city's defining traits, diversity, restlessness, reinvention, were forged in its earliest centuries. Each transformation carried echoes of those before it. To reconstruct lost New York is not merely to visualize vanished streets or forgotten buildings. It is to understand the forces that shaped them: commerce and conflict, migration and memory, ambition and survival. The city has always been an argument between what is and what could be. Its past is not a closed chapter, but a living influence. As modern New York rises and reshapes itself yet again, the foundations remain. Beneath every tower lies an older story, and beneath every story, a landscape that once breathed freely at the edge of the sea. Lost New York is never truly gone. It lives on in the city's rhythm, its resilience, and its unending drive to become something new without entirely forgetting what it once was.